boss told me to think like an owner, so I documented how he lost $7 million and I took his job. The air in the boardroom was so thick you could taste the failure. For Mark Jennings, the senior director of strategy, the taste was bitter, metallic. Across the polished mahogany table, CEO Eleanor Sterling, a woman whose stare could freeze assets, looked at a projection on the wall. The number displayed was negative $5 million. It wasn't just a number, it was a death sentence for careers. And as Mark's eyes darted around the room, looking for a life raft in a sea of his own making, they landed on the one person who wasn't panicking. David, calm, composed, and holding a single unassuming black binder. A binder that was about to change everything. This wasn't just a story about a bad quarter. This was a story about a manager's critical mistake and the employee who was told one too many times to think like an owner. The phrase had become a corporate mantra, a weaponized piece of motivational fluff that Mark Jennings wielded like a scepter. "Think like an owner, David," he'd say, leaning back in his chair, a smug grin plastered on his face. He said it during one-on-ones, in team meetings, and in passing in the hallway. To Mark, it was the perfect shield. It placed all the responsibility for innovation on his team, while reserving all the authority for himself. David Chen, a senior analyst with more talent than his title suggested, heard it for the first time 3 years ago. He had just presented a meticulously researched plan to streamline their client onboarding process. It was data-driven, efficient, and projected to save the company $200,000 in the first year alone. Mark had listened, nodding thoughtfully, only to dismiss it with a wave of his hand at the end. "It's a good thought, David, really, but it's a little small scale. I need you to think bigger. Think like an owner. An owner wouldn't be focused on saving a few pennies here and there. They'd be hunting whales." 2 weeks later, Mark announced his own whale hunting initiative, a flashy, expensive partnership with a B-list industry influencer. It cost the company $250,000 and yielded precisely 7 new leads. The project was quietly shelved, never to be spoken of again. David's proposal gathered digital dust in a forgotten folder. This became the pattern. David would identify a problem, develop a solution backed by hard numbers, and present it. Mark would praise his owner mindset and then proceed with his own gut-feeling, high-risk, low-reward strategy. It was a maddening cycle of wasted potential. Promotions came and went, always passing David by. "You're invaluable in your current role," Mark would say, a consolation prize that felt more like a punishment. The breaking point came during the annual strategy meeting for the launch of their new software suite, Nexus. David had spent weeks analyzing market trends, competitor weaknesses, and potential pricing models. He proposed a tiered subscription model designed to capture small businesses first and then upsell them to enterprise-level packages. It was a slow-burn strategy, but a safe one, building a loyal customer base from the ground up. "David, David, David," Mark said, shaking his head with theatrical pity in front of the entire department. "I appreciate the work, I really do. But where's the splash? Where's the disruption? We need to make a statement." He turned to the whiteboard and drew a large, aggressive-looking arrow pointing upwards. "We're going for a single premium price point. Exclusivity. We're the best, and we need to charge like it. Owners take risks. They don't hedge their bets." That evening, as David sat at his desk long after everyone else had gone home, Mark's words echoed in his head. Think like an owner. An owner, David thought, wouldn't just blindly follow a bad order. An owner would protect their investment. An owner would keep records. He opened a new folder on his secure personal drive. He named it the Owner's Manual. He created a new document and began to type. He detailed his original proposal for the Nexus launch, complete with the market data, the financial projections, and the risk analysis. Then, he detailed Mark's plan, outlining the potential pitfalls he had tried to warn him about in the meeting. He attached a copy of the email he'd sent Mark summarizing his concerns, an email that had gone unanswered. From that day forward, every idea, every suggestion, and every decision became an entry in the owner's manual. He documented his own proposals and the subsequent decisions made by Mark. He attached emails, meeting minutes, and financial reports. Each time Mark shot down one of his data-backed ideas in favor of a flashy, impulsive one, David would calmly go back to his desk, open the file, and make a new entry. He wasn't being vengeful. He was simply thinking like an owner who meticulously documents every asset and every liability. He just didn't realize yet that his biggest liability was sitting in the corner office. The first major test of David's new system came 6 months later. The company was facing a critical choice for its cloud infrastructure provider. The current contract was expiring, and renewal costs were projected to increase by 30%. It was a multi-million-dollar decision that would affect the entire company's performance and budget for the next 5 years. Mark, naturally, had a favorite. He was enamored with OraCloud, the industry giant. Their name carried prestige. Their salesmen took him to expensive steak dinners. Their presentations were full of buzzwords like synergy and paradigm-shifting architecture. Going with OraCloud is a no-brainer, Mark declared in a planning meeting. It shows our clients we're serious. It's what an owner would do. Invest in the best. David, tasked with the technical and financial analysis, had come to a very different conclusion. He spent a month deep diving into 3 potential vendors. While OraCloud was the biggest name, a smaller, hungrier company called Zenith Systems offered 95% of the same functionality for 60% of the cost. More importantly, Zenith's customer service ratings were stellar, while OraCloud's were notoriously poor. Downtime with OraCloud could cost them hundreds of thousands in lost revenue. David prepared a 20-page report. It was a masterclass in due diligence. He included side-by-side cost comparisons, performance benchmarks, client testimonials, and a detailed risk assessment. His recommendation was unequivocal. Signing with Zenith Systems would save the company at least $1.2 million over the 5-year contract, with significantly lower performance risk. He presented his findings to Mark in a private meeting. Mark barely glanced at the report. He was scrolling through his phone, looking at pictures from the golf outing OraCloud had invited him to. "Zenith, huh? Never heard of them," Mark said dismissively. "David, you're getting bogged down in the weeds again. Think about the brand alignment. Think about the optics. An owner doesn't go with the budget option. They go with the power play." He tossed the report onto the corner of his desk. "We're going with OraCloud. Let me know when the contract is ready for my signature." David felt a familiar wave of frustration, but this time it was different. It was cold, focused. He nodded politely. "Understood, Mark." That night, he went home and opened the owner's manual. He scanned his entire 20-page report into the system. He wrote a detailed summary of his conversation with Mark, noting the date, the time, and Mark's exact reasoning for dismissing the report. He then created a new spreadsheet. In one column, he listed the projected 5-year cost of the OraCloud contract. In the next column, he listed the projected cost of the Zenith Systems contract. At the bottom of a third column, he entered the difference. $1,200,000. The OraCloud migration was a disaster. The technical support was, as predicted, abysmal. There were 2 major outages in the first 3 months, costing the company an estimated $400,000 in lost sales and service credits. The integration was clumsy, and the paradigm-shifting architecture was incompatible with several of their legacy systems, requiring expensive, unbudgeted workarounds. Mark, of course, blamed the tech team. "They're just not skilled enough to handle this level of sophisticated technology," he complained in a directors' meeting. David, who was in the room to present other data, said nothing. He just watched, his expression unreadable. Later that day, he added a new entry to his spreadsheet, detailing the $400,000 in losses from the outages. The running total of Mark's owner decisions was now at negative $1.6 million. The paper trail was growing, a silent, damning testament to the cost of ego over evidence, and the company's most expensive mistake was still yet to come. Project Titan. That's what Mark called it. It was his magnum opus, the project that was supposed to get him that coveted vice president title. It was an ambitious, company-wide software platform designed to integrate sales, marketing, and customer service into one seamless, AI-driven ecosystem. On paper, it was brilliant. In reality, it was a ticking time bomb. The core of Project Titan was a custom-built CRM, and the choice of the development firm to build it was the single most important decision of the project. The budget was immense, $3 million. David was part of the vetting committee. After months of exhaustive research, his team had narrowed the field to 2 finalists. The first was Code Solid, a reputable, established firm with a long haul of success stories from Fortune 500 companies. Their proposal was detailed, their timeline was realistic, and their price was exactly $3 million. The second firm was Innovatech. They were new, flashy, and full of promises. Their CEO was a charismatic, fast-talking visionary who reminded David a lot of Mark. Innovatech's proposal was slick, but vague on technical details. They promised to deliver the entire platform for $2.5 million, a full $500,000 under Code Solid's bid. For David, the choice was obvious. Innovatech had red flags all over it. Their client portfolio was thin. Their technical team seemed inexperienced, and their low-ball offer screamed of a company that would cut corners or hit them with hidden fees later. He voiced his concerns strongly in the final committee meeting. "The $500,000 in savings isn't real," David argued, pointing to his analysis. "The risk of delays, bugs, and feature creep with an unproven vendor like Innovatech is astronomical. Code Solid is the safe, reliable choice. They are the true owner's choice because they guarantee a return on our investment." Mark, who had been courted heavily by Innovatech's charismatic CEO, saw things differently. "David, you're being far too conservative," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "An owner knows how to spot a bargain. They know how to find disruptive talent. We'd be fools to leave $500,000 on the table. Innovatech is hungry. They'll work harder for us. We're going with them." The decision was final. Mark proudly announced the partnership, highlighting the significant cost savings he had secured for the company. He was hailed as a fiscal genius. David felt a cold dread in the pit of his stomach. This wasn't like the cloud provider decision. This was a company-defining project. If this failed, it wouldn't just be a line item on a budget. It could cripple the entire organization. That night, the owner's manual received its largest entry to date. David uploaded his complete vendor analysis, the risk assessment reports, and the minutes from the final committee meeting. He wrote a detailed narrative of the debate, quoting Mark's justification for choosing Innovatech. Then he created a new, ominous entry in his financial tracker. He put down the potential $500,000 saving, but marked it with a massive asterisk. Beside it, he created a new column: Project Titan, Potential Liability. He left the field blank, but he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he would be filling it in soon. He sent one last email to Mark and copied the head ed of the tech department. It was worded carefully and professionally. Mark, further to our discussion, I am formally documenting my recommendation to proceed with Code Solid. While I respect the committee's final decision, I feel it is my due diligence to state for the record that I believe the long-term risks associated with Innovatech outweigh the short-term cost benefits. I have attached my full analysis for your reference. Mark never replied, but the email was sent. The read receipt was saved. The record was now indelible. The point of no return had been crossed, and David was the only one with a map showing the cliff they were all speeding towards. The first sign of trouble with Project Titan was a missed deadline. The initial beta version was delivered 3 weeks late. The second sign was that the beta was barely functional. It was riddled with bugs, the user interface was a nightmare, and core features were completely missing. Innovatech's charismatic CEO was suddenly much harder to reach. His excuses were a masterclass in corporate doublespeak. Unforeseen complexities, scope alignment challenges, and synergizing development cycles. It was all meaningless noise to cover up a simple truth. They were in over their heads. Mark, whose entire career was now lashed to the sinking ship of Project Titan, went into full-on panic mode, which he disguised as decisive leadership. He demanded his teams work weekends to support Innovatech. He pulled developers off other critical projects to try and patch the holes in Innovatech's shoddy code. Morale plummeted. The company's other revenue streams began to suffer from the neglect. David watched the chaos unfold from his desk. He continued to do his job, but he also continued to document. Every missed deadline from Innovatech was logged. Every internal report detailing the growing list of bugs was saved to the owner's manual. Every dollar spent on overtime and external consultants to fix Innovatech's mistakes was added to the Project Titan liability column in his secret spreadsheet. The initial savings of $500,000 was wiped out in the first 2 months. By month 4, the project was $1 million over budget and 6 months behind schedule. The codebase was such a tangled mess that some senior developers recommended scrapping the entire thing and starting over. The breaking point came when the sales team was finally given access to the finished product. It was so unstable and unreliable that they couldn't trust it in front of clients. A major sales pitch to a potential 7-figure client was derailed when the platform crashed mid-demonstration. The client walked. The deal was lost. The news of the lost deal spread through the office like a virus. The hushed whispers turned into open anxiety. This wasn't just a failed IT project anymore. It was a direct hit to the company's bottom line and its reputation. That's when the summons came. An email from Eleanor Sterling's executive assistant. Mandatory boardroom meeting. Project Titan postmortem. The email went out to all department heads, project leads, and Mark. For some reason David couldn't explain. He was on the list too. As he walked towards the boardroom, David saw Mark pacing outside, his face pale, rehearsing his excuses. When he saw David, he shot him a venomous glare. "You better have my back in there. Chen," he hissed. "This whole team needs to take ownership of this failure." David just looked at him, his expression neutral. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He adjusted the black binder he was carrying under his arm and walked into the boardroom. He was ready to think like an owner who was about to foreclose on a very bad debt. The implosion was complete. Now, It was time for the fallout. The boardroom was a tomb. CEO Eleanor Sterling sat at the head of the table, her face carved from granite. The CFO was to her right, looking at a tablet with an expression of pure disgust. The mood was funereal. "I want an explanation," Eleanor said, her voice quiet, but carrying the weight of a collapsing building. "Project Titan is currently $3.5 million over budget. It's 9 months behind schedule, and it just cost us the largest potential client of the year. Someone start talking." All eyes went to Mark. He stood up, fumbling with his notes. He launched into a prepared speech, a torrent of corporate jargon designed to obscure rather than clarify. He blamed the volatile market, unrealistic expectations from the sales team, and a lack of synergistic alignment from the development vendor. He subtly tried to spread the blame, mentioning how the entire project team had faced challenges. "We took a calculated risk with an innovative partner to save the company $500,000, Mark said, trying to sound like a bold leader. "Sometimes, even the best-laid plans of owners don't pan out." Eleanor was not impressed. "A calculated risk, Mark? Or a reckless gamble? My CFO tells me the total damage, including the overruns, the lost deal, and the cost of pulling our own engineers off their work, is approaching $5 million. That's not a risk. That's a catastrophe." The room was silent. Mark's face was slick with sweat. He had run out of words, out of excuses. "Does anyone else have anything to add?" Eleanor asked, her gaze sweeping across the room. "Anyone have a different perspective on how we got here?" David cleared his throat. It was a small sound, but in the oppressive silence, it was like a thunderclap. "I do, Miss Sterling." All heads turned to him. Mark looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. David stood up, placing his black binder on the table with a soft, definitive thud. "My name is David Chen. I was on the vendor vetting committee for Project Titan," he began, his voice calm and steady. "I'm afraid I have to disagree with Mark's assessment. This wasn't an unforeseeable problem. It was, in fact, entirely foreseeable." He opened the binder. He didn't use a projector. He didn't need one. He wanted them to see the paper, the physical evidence. "This is the complete due diligence report on the 2 finalist vendors, Code Solid and Innovatech," he said, turning the binder around for Eleanor to see. "As you can see, on page 17, my official recommendation was to select Code Solid. The report outlines the significant risks associated with Innovatech, including their lack of experience, questionable financials, and the high probability of the very cost overruns and delays we have experienced." He then slid a single printed email across the table to Eleanor. "This is a copy of an email I sent to Mark, for the record, on the day the decision was made, formally documenting my concerns. My concerns were dismissed in favor of a $500,000 short-term saving." He continued, his voice never rising, never betraying emotion. He was simply stating facts. He walked them through the Aura Cloud decision, presenting the data that showed how a different choice would have saved the company $1.6 million. He presented 2 other smaller projects, where his data-driven proposals were ignored in favor of Mark's gut feelings, costing the company hundreds of thousands more. Finally, he turned to the last page in his binder. It was a simple spreadsheet. One column was titled Mark's Decision Cost. The other was Documented Alternative Savings. He had tallied everything up: the cloud contract, the failed marketing campaigns, and the colossal $5 million black hole of Project Titan. "Mark often told me to think like an owner," David said, his eyes finally meeting Mark's. Mark looked like a ghost. "An owner, Ms. Sterling, protects their assets. They mitigate risk. They make decisions based on data, not ego. Over the past 2 years, the decisions made against documented, data-supported advice have cost this company, by my conservative estimate, over $7 million in losses and missed opportunities. David closed the binder. The silence that followed was absolute. The reckoning had arrived. Eleanor Sterling stared at the spreadsheet David had left on the table. She didn't need to check his math. The evidence was overwhelming, the logic irrefutable. She looked from the damning numbers to the ashen face of Mark Jennings, and then to the calm, composed analyst who had just dismantled his superior's entire career with quiet competence. She finally broke the silence. "Mark," she said, her voice dangerously soft, "please pack up your personal belongings. Security will escort you from the building. We will be in touch regarding the terms of your separation." Mark opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing to say. He nodded once, a broken gesture, and walked out of the boardroom without looking at anyone. The door clicked shut behind him, the sound echoing the end of an era of mismanagement. Eleanor's gaze then fell on David. There was a long, tense pause as everyone in the room wondered what would happen next. Had David just committed career suicide by so thoroughly exposing the rot in the department? "David," Eleanor said, her tone shifting from ice to steel. "That was the single most impressive and, frankly, terrifying presentation I have ever seen. You did what you were told. You thought like an owner. The problem is, we weren't giving you the authority of one." She stood up and walked around the table until she was standing next to him. "The strategy department is in shambles," she continued, her voice now ringing with purpose. "Project Titan needs to be salvaged or scrapped. The deals we've lost need to be won back. We don't need another director who relies on gut feelings. We need a leader who relies on facts. We need an owner." She looked him directly in the eye. "The position of Director of Strategy is now open. I want you to lead it, effective immediately. I want you to take the owner's manual and make it the official company playbook. You will have the budget, the team, and the full authority to make the decisions you've been documenting for the past 2 years. Do you accept?" A ripple of shock went through the room. David, the overlooked analyst, was being offered the keys to the kingdom. He looked at Eleanor, at the faces of the other executives around the table, and felt a surge of validation that was far more satisfying than any revenge. He had done more than just save his own career. He had provided a path to save the company. "Yes, Ms. Sterling," David said, his voice clear and confident. "I accept." In the months that followed, Director David Chen transformed the department. He implemented a culture of data-driven decision-making. He salvaged what he could of Project Titan by finally hiring Code Solid to clean up the mess, and he put the company back on a path to profitability. He never had to tell his team to think like an owner, because he empowered them to act like one, rewarding them for their diligence and respecting their expertise. He proved that true ownership isn't a motivational slogan you say to people. It's a level of trust and authority you give them. It's not about taking risks. It's about taking responsibility. David's story is a powerful reminder that in any organization, the truth is in the data, and true leadership is about listening to it. He was pushed to the edge, but instead of breaking, he built a case. He turned a meaningless corporate catchphrase into a tool for accountability and, ultimately, his own success. Have you ever been in a situation like David's, where you knew the right answer, but no one would listen? It's a frustrating place to be, but as this story shows, diligence and documentation can be your most powerful weapons. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever felt like the smartest person in a room full of bad decisions, do us a favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And for more stories about corporate drama and professional triumph, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Now, we want to hear from you. Let us know in the comments below. What city are you watching from, and how old are you? We love getting to know our community from all around the world. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.